Hey, what is up, everyone? I'm Dr. Mike Trubetskov, the mad scientist of metal. Today, I want to make a bit of a comparison. Playing live on stage versus recording in the studio. It seems that these two activities are the same, playing your instrument, just different environments. However, based on my most recent experience playing live with Hybrid Nightmares, all hail the obelisk, I noticed quite a significant difference in these two. And today I want to compare what this difference is and hopefully be able to help you prepare for your next activity, be it a recording studio session or a live gig. Let's do it. So clearly, and unlike the most of you, my playing environment primarily is the recording studio. I record a lot. I record a lot of other guitarists coming in here and I help as a producer. But I also record a lot of my own material, me playing, sketching some ideas or doing some final takes for my own projects. I do a lot of guitar and a lot of synth, and I also practice in the studio environment with headphones. And that allowed quite a bit of a comparison when hitting the stage for the first time in a few years with Hybrid. And unlike most of you, you guys primarily either play live or practice in rehearsal spaces as well. So, in this video I want to talk about three key focus areas that differ in the studio versus on stage. And these are your sound, your performance, and the ability to hear yourself. Let's start with sound. In the studio, it's all about getting a great sound. Everything and anything we can do to improve it, even by marginal 1 or 2%, matters. In the studio, you look at your performance through a lens of a microscope, which is well-treated room, speakers, good quality monitoring, and you can really pinpoint all the little details that you're doing, which is very, very different from your live situation. There's so much noise in live environment and sounds mask into each other, and they clash and interfere because there is no way to EQ out the guitar from bass and vice versa. Which comes to this important idea. For live sound, great sound obviously matters a lot as well, and it's all about getting your sound as good as you can. But there are lots of other factors. These are consistency of your sound. How consistent can you get your guitar to sound throughout different venues, which differ a lot. Portability. How heavy is your stuff? How easy is it to bring to the venue? That matters a lot, and many people forget about that. For instance, if you're using your tube amp, in the studio it may sound just magnificent and perfect. However, when you bring it to the venue, it is bulky and heavy. You may blow a tube easily, or just crack it, and then it doesn't function anymore. And maybe you are only using the cabs that are provided by the venue. Therefore, sometimes your amp will sound much worse throughout those cabs. Plus, venue acoustics put such a massive print on your amp. I've seen so many gigs when two guitarists were using big tube amps, and because of the bad cabinets and bad room acoustics, their sound clashed with each other, and it just sounded muddy and messy without any definition between the two. Because as I mentioned before, you cannot quite efficiently EQ out certain frequencies. You don't have that option in the live scenario. So, details in live set are much less audible, and consistency, portability, and reliability matters a lot. So you should consider this next time you are preparing for your live gig. Another factor that affects the sound a lot, as I mentioned, is venue acoustics, but also venue monitoring and front of house setup. When we played live, certain instruments could be additionally sent to foldbacks for each player. And those foldbacks actually change the sound. The loudness can change the response, may make your guitar sound more bassy, or maybe it can make your kicks sound way too muddy as well. So there are options throughout the venue to change your sound. And as much as your source matters, there is more flexibility for that as well. So maybe when dialing in the sound for your live performance, you may consider making it a bit more neutral. Don't make it too bass heavy or too trebly. Also, you may want to consider the frequency response that changes with volume. The louder it gets, the more different frequencies are amplified. Look at this Fletcher-Manson curve. If you look at this curve, your practice and studio loudness would sit at these two lower levels, whereas your live levels would be these two, or around there. So you can see that when signal is quiet, sub-range and low end is more emphasized. You get a bit of a drop in the mids, whereas with louder volume, your sound gets a bit more consistent, kind of compressed by your ears, and that's the perception curve. However, you have a bit of a peak at 10K. So if your sound is a bit bright, you may have problems within that area, and that may become a bit piercing for your listener. So just make it somewhat more neutral next time you're dialing in sounds for your live performances. In the second section, let's talk about the performances on stage versus in the studio. Now, in live gigs, you are the entertainer. No matter how heavy your music is, no matter which genre of rock or metal you are performing, you are entertaining the crowd. You make them have fun, and you have fun as well. So, within a set, typically a 40-minute long set, you don't have that much of a break. You don't even have more than 2 minutes between the songs, often most. So, stamina and possibility to perform your songs without any hiccups throughout the whole set becomes super important. The environment is also rather distracting. You have flickering lights. It is really hot on stage, so you're sweaty. It's hard to palm mute your guitar when you're sweaty. You have crowd interaction that may be distracting, and you cannot just focus on performing your parts the best way possible, although it definitely is the goal. But you have to engage with the crowd, you have to entertain, you have to have fun, and you have to put that into the consideration when you are playing. Whereas in the studio, you don't have that distraction. Although stressful environment as well, as I mentioned before, you're looking at your performance at a microscopic precision levels. And you're not going to play through your songs in one go. You're much more likely to just play through little fragments, riffs, or even parts of the riffs, and take much more in-depth attention to the details, do overdubs, polish up certain parts, put layers together, maybe record artificial harmonics separately, record certain parts separately so that they feel more present. There's much more attention to detail both in sound and in performance in the studio, and you have to be prepared for that. Obviously, playing into the click also matters. That's why we're coming into the next section, which is hearing yourself. When we play live, we play in our in-ear system. But even that, without a proper sound check, is not enough to hearing yourself well. If you're playing any heavy music that is technical and requires precision, for the most part it is, I would say you must use in-ears and a click track, and if you don't, you're risking for your performance to fall apart and not be tight enough. But as I mentioned before, even that requires a lot of setup. Sometimes you won't be able to hear yourself well even in ears if sound on stage isn't great, because there might be a build-up of certain frequencies, for instance low end on stage. If you have guitar cabs behind you and they're loud, no matter how hard you crank up your monitors, that low end may be woofy enough to distract you, and there's not much to do about that. So you have to be prepared for that, and you have to adjust your setup and your sound on stage based on that factor too, rather than pure sound. Whereas in the studio, there isn't much of a problem hearing yourself. However, playing into the click and getting used to that loud and annoying tick, tick, tick all the time is psychologically challenging at times. However, it is much easier and shouldn't be a big problem to adapt to. You just have to be prepared for that. In summary, live setup is a much more distracting environment with less focus on your sound and more focus on the ability to hear yourself and perform better. I now understand really well when musicians come into the studio unprepared for this surgical level of precision required for tight tracking of heavy music. Because you guys are not used to hearing yourself that clearly, and you simply do not oversee that level of detail in your playing. To get somewhat closer to that level of precision, which is, in my opinion, required for any professional musician, consider using in-ears, consider using a consistent source for your sounds, be it guitar amps, bass amps, vocal microphones, maybe kick triggers, amp modular systems. Consider testing them at loud levels and carving the sound so that each instrument fills their own space. And consider not only playing without hiccups and having fun for the whole set, but making sure that each riff is performed well, and if not, practice that riff slowly until you nail it. That's how you get prepared for a studio after being so used to playing live. Hope that this was helpful. Thanks so much for checking it out, and until the next time, rock on!